以下节目包含成人内容，请在家长指引下收听。欢迎收听文化土豆，我是益康糯米。今天是2022年3月6日，现在是晚上的19点59分。我在英国的伦敦。这么强调时间和地点，是因为今天我们有2位非常特殊的嘉宾，一位是在伦敦从事市场 marketing 工作的Lanyi，另外一位是他的先生，是一位乌克兰人，叫 Ahmed。你好 ，Hi Ahmed。Hello。
你好。
我其实是在2天前就在一个偶然的场合碰见了，所以就想，既然碰到了一个乌克兰人，就觉得应该义不容辞的拉来做一期节目。Okay, so Ahmed, would you please introduce yourself to our listeners? I notice your name is not Volodymyr, or it's not a typical Slavic name. Yes.
Yeah,
please.
Sure. So I was born in Ukraine, in Kiev. My father is originally from Syria. He moved to Ukraine during the Soviet Union time to study an international relationship as a lawyer, and that's basically where he met my mother. And so that's where I was born in Kiev. By trade, I'm a software engineer, but I was also involved in a lot of other crafts that involved software engineering, like design. I also had my own software company before, so you can say I'm entrepreneur in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you mind telling us in what year were you born?
Yeah, I was born in 1995.
And what is your first language? And what's your second language and third language?
So at home, we usually speak in Russian, but I learned Ukrainian when I was going to school. So I can freely speak in both languages. With parents, I still talk in Russian, and that's mainly because of the Soviet Union time. It was almost discouraged to talk in Ukrainian, so most people were speaking Russian at the time. So my parents kind of still have this old habit, but in school, when you study, you need to speak Ukrainian. All the textbooks were in Ukrainian. So that's how I learned Ukrainian as well over time when I was going to school.
And how do you identify yourself? Do you think of yourself in nationality terms, or?
Yeah, I would say I am Ukrainian. Yeah.
And when did you come to London?
So first time I came here in 2018, I think. We were going through acceleration program for startups with my company. So we went through multiple interviews in London, and then we passed to this acceleration program. They selected 10 startups out of, I think, 1,200 applications. And the program is basically about introducing those selected startups to mentors, investors, clients from UK, so they can build their own network here and basically develop the product and raise the next round of funding for their companies.
Was it a big deal landing this opportunity for you?
Yeah, for sure. So the Startup Accelerator is actually a network of accelerators across the world, and we tried to apply in many different locations basically to the branch of these accelerators, and we were rejected like times after times. I think at least 3 times we applied, we were rejected. So when we applied to London accelerator, we kind of put all our effort to make sure we will pass through the selection process, and indeed we succeeded.
And is there a big tech scene, startup scene in Ukraine, or is in Kyiv?
Yeah, for sure. It's extremely, I think it's extremely vibrant, to be honest, and like a lot of technological companies are either originated in Ukraine or they have some Ukrainian-born founders. Like, for example, WhatsApp was founded by a Ukrainian-born founder. Grammarly is an enormous company known around the world with the 50% of their workforce is in Ukraine. That's just big companies, but we also have a lot of smaller startups who still produce a lot of different products. So indeed, the scene is very vibrant in Ukraine in general.
I don't know if this is relevant. I know someone whose son was part of the the initial founding team of Grammarly, and he's Chinese, and he was in charge of marketing, which brings to you, Lanyi. Now I'm going to switch to Chinese for our audience. 你们俩是怎么遇到的？
我们俩在 Tinder 上认识的。
OK， 也是18年。
对对对，那个因为我也是18年就是来伦敦上学的，读研究生，就是1年制的一个硕士。因为我们俩都是属于18年来的嘛，然后反正就还挺巧的，反正在 Tinder 上面就遇见了。
That's very sweet. You probably understood the keyword there. And let's talk about this week. Back to you, Ahmed. I don't know. I want to ask you how are you feeling? How are you coping? And how's your family? Can you tell us about their status?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it was a huge shock, I think, for everyone. I remember how I discovered, because usually every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, I'm going to the gym very early in the morning, like around 6 or something. And it was Thursday, so I was in the gym at the time, and I checked the news. Suddenly, a lot of messages popped out in my messenger application, and I started checking the news and basically discovered that Russia pretty much openly started open conflict and invaded Ukraine. Obviously I wasn't able to continue my exercise, so I just come back home.
What did you do? When did you call your parents? Or you messaged?
Yeah, I immediately started writing everyone and asking how are they doing, are they safe, and not only my parents but also a lot of friends and just the people who I know. Just start checking in, how are they doing, because Russia started invasion with a lot of rocket strike, so they launched a lot of rockets across the whole country. So that was very unexpected and quite devastating. I would say right now my parents are safe, so they managed to leave the country just recently, a few days ago. At first they stayed in Kiev, and they hid in shelters because of the bombing and airstrikes. Then they moved to a village slightly further from Kiev to stay together with my grandparents, and there was a lot of airstrikes there as well, so they were hiding in the basements and stuff. And eventually we agreed that they need to leave because the situation was escalating so much and so quickly as well. And they took a train. It was around 25, maybe 30 hours trip. And they were not able to travel from the first try because there were so many people trying to evacuate and leave the country. So they had to jump on the next train instead of the one that we originally planned for. But thankfully they managed to travel to the border safely, cross the border, and right now they're outside of country.
So when did they make their trip? That's this week, Tuesday?
Yes, I think it was Wednesday or something.
Wednesday.
And they arrived on Friday.
Yeah, so about maybe 5 days passed. So can you talk about how they made this decision? Because they didn't decide to leave on day one. So was it because of disbelief or wait and see? Like and how did they pack and what's their expectation?
Yeah, I would say the main reason was because, I mean, as a human, you don't want to leave your home. You spent your whole life there, you developed you designed apartment, choose the wallpapers and stuff. You don't want to leave your home at all. So it was hard for them to even go from Kiev to this village, even though Kiev is under constant air raid alerts. So like every 10 minutes, every hour, you receive a notification that there is a new airstrike incoming and you need to hide in a shelter. So psychologically, I think that was challenging from that perspective. So because Russia started bringing more troops closer to the border since basically beginning of January, everyone in Ukraine started packing the emergency bag with all the documents, with all the medical equipment and some warm clothes and stuff like that. So most of the people were prepared to leave. I think none of them truly believed that this will actually happen.
Why not?
It seems impossible to have such open conflict and invasion into country at this time. Even considering that Russia annexed Crimea and they kind of occupied 2 cities on the east side of Ukraine, I think most people still believed that such conflict on such scale can be avoided. But I mean, nevertheless, they still packed the bags and kind of prepared themselves in case this happens. So when the time came, it was, at least from the preparation perspective, easier for them to leave because they have everything packed already.
Does your dad have, is he still in touch with his relatives in Syria?
Yes. And the situation there is also not great.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, at this point, it's even worse because the conflict has been going for a longer time. So, for example, they have access, at least the village where the relatives live, they have access to electricity for only 2 hours per day. Mm-hmm. So that's the only time they can access electricity, internet, water supply is very limited. So it's not very easy conditions to live, really. So a lot of people from Syria also try to search ways to find their future outside of country and flee somehow.
Yeah. And where are your parents staying now?
So right now they're in Slovakia.
So what's the plan?
Honestly, it's hard to talk about plans at the moment considering the situation changes so fast. But our current basic plan is that we're waiting for some time, up to 2 weeks, maybe less, to see how the situation developed. And if we pass point of no return, then they will go further in Europe, probably in Germany, and start applying for like a refugee status, doing the legal procedures and stuff like that.
So where are they staying now in Czechoslovakia? With friends or?
No, it's just Airbnb.
Airbnb?
Yeah.
They arranged everything privately themselves?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were doing that together.
I see.
Yeah.
And when you say the point of no return, what does that mean?
I think a lot of people still have hope that the further escalation can be avoided. And also, positively speaking, if you look at the results that Ukrainian army pushing back Russians, it gives you some hope, because considering that Russia brought so many troops to Ukraine, it's been 11 days. They still were not able to capture any major cities.
Yeah.
And Ukrainian army is still pushing back, despite being much smaller in numbers. So it gives some hope. I mean, at least to me, it gives a lot of hope that we can push them further and then eventually switch from protecting the land to basically fighting back and take back what they took from us eventually, those territories.
Including Crimea?
Well, I'm not talking about Crimea at the moment, but at least the territories that they kind of occupy at the moment after this invasion.
Yeah. So switching to Lanyi for a minute. 我其实在听 Ahmed 讲的时候，你会觉得他现在是客观的在看这件事情吗？就是说他一方面他了解的更多，但另外一方面我感觉他还在想说我们是不是能够 reverse the situation， 就是倒退回去到1周前啊。
我觉得可能因为我们看的新闻是比如说英文世界新闻或者是俄罗斯媒体的新闻，就可能有更多方面吧，但是艾红麦看的新闻大部分是来自乌克兰媒体的，因为现在乌克兰的情况就是整个民族前所未有的团结，所以就是也是给大家希望吧，就是希望能够速战速决。但是说实话，对我来说，我是觉得这个事情至少不会1-2周就结束，肯定还是有一个要有一个长远的打算，对，所以我们在就是帮他父母在计划下一步的时候，他也一直在说，包括今天，其实我们早上的时候都在和他家里人在和他吵架，就是因为他爸爸就是说，我们现在待在斯洛伐克已经没有什么意义了，因为 短时间也不可能再回基辅，然后就想马上就去德国，但是我们那个房子已经定了嘛，是Ahmed帮他定的。对，但是阿德就觉得应该待2周，然后看看情况，如果有可能的话再回基辅。但是我就也劝他说，我觉得可能要早做打算，去看看下一步去哪里这样子。但是很难，我觉得很难让他接受，就很难说服他吧。
So I'm not entirely clear. Do you think let's wait and see in 2 weeks, are you hoping for a defeat of Russian forces, or are you hoping Russians are simply posturing now, even, outrageous posture, but still they'll come to a ceasefire and come to an agreement? So which kind of outcome are you? They are very different outcomes, right?
I mean, to be honest, I just hope for their forces withdrawal, basically.
Yeah.
They should no longer stay in Ukraine. And it can happen either through negotiations that are happening. There will be a third round of negotiations. I think actually today it's happening. So Ukrainian side is talking about ceasefire, withdrawal of the forces, organizing, or at least organizing the green corridors to be able to evacuate people from the most dangerous places at the moment, the one that suffered the most after the bombing.
What do you imagine how they were discussing in these ceasefire meetings, so the so-called peace talks?
I can't even imagine, to be honest. We don't have much information about the details of the discussion. Usually those negotiations happen in different places also for security reasons. We don't get much information how exactly the talk went. We only know the somewhat agreed results.
Yeah.
So for example, after last negotiations, they agreed to provide the green corridors for a few cities. But unfortunately, the next day, when Ukrainian side started evacuating people, Russian troops fired back at the cities. So they practically broke the agreement during the negotiations. So I'm quite skeptical, to be honest, about those negotiations. I'm hopeful, but quite skeptical at the same time. Another point that can help resolve this conflict is that Russian forces, they are quite demoralized in general because they have no purpose in this fight. They just came to another nation, another land. They have no purpose, while Ukrainian forces, not only the regular army, but everyone, right now, everyone tries to participate into resistance, and they have a purpose because they protecting their own home, basically.
I hope that's true. And when you talk to your parents, are they more optimistic than you, or are they more pessimistic? I'm just looking at generational difference if they lived under the Soviet Union, or not necessarily your parents, but the older generation.
Yeah, it's hard for me to speak about that in general, but from my parents' perspective, they're less optimistic indeed. But I wouldn't say it's representative because, for example, just yesterday or today, there were a lot of peaceful protests. So like people who were under Russian occupation, so Russian forces basically occupied a specific city, they just went on the streets with Ukrainian flags, stating that this specific city is Ukraine. It's not going to be part of Russia. It's not going to be independent republic and something like that. They're just stating that it's part of Ukraine. And there are a lot of older people as well in those protests.
Yeah.
So it varies a lot.
Is it because for the older generation, they really don't see Russian as that foreign? I know that might be a problematic way to put it, but when I look at the videos, they go up, they talk down to the soldiers as from their parents' perspective, like go home and what are you doing? We are Ukraine, but also there seems to be a common cultural thing going on there to enable them to do that.
A lot of people from Ukraine have relatives in Russia and vice versa as well. That's true. But despite that, it's different cultures. We have a lot of things in common, but we are quite different as well at the same time.
I think there is one interesting thing is that previously Ahmed told me that his father mainly watched Russian medias and news, and just starting from last month, he changed a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, would you like to talk more about that?
Yeah, I think in general even this invasion united a lot of people and cleared their perspectives. Like, for example, my father was watching a lot of Russian media to learn about the news, but after the invasion, he clearly understood what's going on. That
what is going on?
In terms of the information that Russian media broadcast is not really aligned with the reality of the situation. So it showed him that all the news he watched before doesn't really represent the reality. The reality is quite different compared to what Russian media broadcasts.
Yeah. I know that TV commentators and other people not directly suffering, they might analyze what's going on and what Russia wants. And do you think about this? Do you try to get into the head of Putin and what he wants and what he's doing?
Yes, I would say so, but I wouldn't say it was like a conscious effort. It's just something I'm doing to get more information about the situation. So, for example, since the Thursday 24th, I remember it very clearly, it feels to me that half a year passed. It's not a week. It feels like half a year passed because every day there is so much stuff happening that it feels like ages already passed through that whole conflict. And during that time, I consumed so much news and information almost to a point that I consciously tried to overwhelm myself just to understand better or to learn what are the new cities they're bombing, and if I have relatives there, do I need to write them? So I'm trying to stay as much as possible on top of everything that's happening, just to make sure I'm closely following the conflict, and if it directly impacts my friends or my family, I can somehow react, somehow write if they're okay, and yeah, just check in.
This is a genuine personal question. Like, I'm curious. All the wars that Americans fought, that we watched on CNN, they had journalists embedded with their troops. And we kind of had like a front seat to what's going on. It feels that this war, a lot of people are saying it's been broadcast on social media, but then I feel what we see is the periphery. It's not really the battleground scenes. And I think neither Russia nor Ukraine actually was showing very much, how the missiles were launched and, so I'm not sure we know what's going on. I don't know whether in Ukraine you get more information or what.
Yeah, I would say in general, we are just following the consequences. So like after the fact, when something happened. And the reason for that, from what I understand, is that by showing the actions of Ukrainian forces in real time, you are putting them on higher danger. Because the Russian troops, they're following the social media just the same way. So if somebody is broadcasting the real-time information, it's a chance for Russian troops to either correct their shot, maybe they missed, maybe they need to rethink their strategy. So it's extremely dangerous, I think, for Ukrainians to broadcast in real time, especially in social media, what exactly going on. So usually news and updates are coming with 2 hours delay on average.
Yeah. If you go to Russo-Ukrainian war on Wikipedia, it's not from 10 days ago, it's from much earlier. Can you talk about how this war has changed you as a person? And I guess, just start from there.
Yeah, I would say in general, before 2014. 2014 was the catalyst for myself. So before that, I was very passive follower of political environment in general. I was not paying attention at all. I was mostly focusing on my work. I was focusing on new tech and stuff like that. But 2014, it was a breaking moment almost. Since 2014, I was following the political scene, new reforms, new policies very closely. Because during the 2014, we had this conflict between willingness of the country to join more European Union, pro-European Union approach versus joining more Russian alliance economically and politically and in general. And at that time, the whole revolution of dignity, that's how we call it in Ukraine, started with regular students from the university who went out on the main Independence Square in Kiev, and they were protesting against joining the Russian economical alliance. And our president at that time, who was very pro-Russian, he decided to solve this little protest problem with brute force. So he basically sent a lot of skilled military and soldiers. They beat those students, and then the next day the whole country know about that. And this event triggered a lot of people because they also were against joining the Russian alliance, and they were more pro-European Union instead. So more and more people from the whole Ukraine gathered on this Independence Square, and they stated their terms is that they are staying on this Independence Square until the alliance is no longer on the table. So they wanted to join the European Union instead, basically, and try to be more European leaning.
Was there any data showing what percentage of the population is for EU and what percentage is pro-Russian?
Yeah, it's hard for me to remember numbers from that period, but there was enough people gathered on this street that our president at the time decided to double down on a force. So he put the snipers who surrounded this basically street. They were shooting regular protesters. He started using more and more military solutions for protest. And at that time, I was in a university, and because this is such a big event, it's not something that happens very frequently in Ukraine. It's just got into everyone's attention. And because the view of being more European leaning was close to me as well, I wanted to support the protest however I could. So my involvement was mostly in bringing some food and medicine, some warm clothes to protesters who stayed on this square indefinitely. So they were basically camping there until our president at the time refused joining the Russian alliance. And this whole story ended in a way that eventually our pro-Russian president fled the country, and he fled the country to Russia. And Russia basically used the weakest moment in Ukraine to occupy Crimea Peninsula and sent their troops, Russian-backed troops, to two cities in the east part of Ukraine who was allegedly mostly pro-Russian. So that was the beginning of this whole conflict that lasted for like 8 years, since 2014.
I totally sympathize with why your generation want to be more European and less Russian. And I don't know how much Putin is a factor, like he's not very attractive. And part of me also want to say, just for the sake of argument, and also I believe in Russia and also in China, at least Chinese spectators to this drama would say you are too naive to think you can get away with it. I mean, the first argument is, America wants to expand NATO, and it wants to fight Russia. But, America is not forcing Ukraine to do it. It's probably Ukraine and other Eastern European countries that's fighting to join the EU and NATO. Is there, looking back, a sense of naivety there? That living on the edge of great empires, you don't have the luxury to do that. What do you say to that kind of viewpoint?
I think it's valid to say that we don't have the luxury, but I also think we don't have other choice, because historically Russia has shown that they are not ashamed of entering the sovereign countries. And the same scenarios happened in Georgia in 2008. Exactly the same scenario. They occupied part of Georgia, they sent their Russian-backed troops. Eventually they recognized those states as independent, and eventually they put even more military as a full-fledged invasion of Georgia. And Georgia took a lot of years to recover from that. So that's why right now they're trying to be extremely careful about participating in any sanctions Russia-related, because they already experienced this. And I think another context for that would be that under Soviet Union, despite the stereotypical beliefs that everyone were united and happy, Russia was kind of discouraging other cultures. Ukrainian culture, Georgian culture, a lot of other cultures who were part of the Union, they were diminished. And pro-Russian culture was more dominant, I would say. And that's just historically doesn't sit well with Ukrainian people, because we want our own culture. We want to protect our own culture. Ukraine historically been under many empires over many years. Russian Empire, there was other empires who occupied, there was a slavery problem and stuff like that. And during those whole years, the effort was to erase Ukrainian culture and Ukraine as a nation. So that's why I think it's very personal topic as well for many Ukrainians.
You said, back to my question, is it a luxury? But you want it, the luxury. So you think there is a way to have it?
Yes. Yes.
And can you describe how that can be achieved?
That's a good question. From idealistic perspective, yes. I would say as soon as Russian internal politics change, their neighboring country will live in more prosperity, I would say. There should no longer be imperialistic view on things, so that's another narrative that Putin is pushing, is that Ukraine doesn't really exist. It's fake country, how he stated. That Ukraine was gifted by different Russian emperors and stuff, which doesn't make any sense historically, but that's the narrative he's pushing towards. So as long as this narrative no longer exists, I think there is a way for countries to coexist together.
Yeah. You are in this international marriage, so you must have heard the reaction in Chinese social media and Chinese media and the Chinese state. Is it hard to understand why the Chinese reaction is so different from say the British public's reaction?
I wouldn't say it's hard for me. I mean, I can understand why the reaction the way it is. I understand the relationship between China and Russia, and that might be a reason. But at the same time, I also see that China doesn't want to proactively support this conflict in terms of, for example, there was a UN hearing regarding withdrawing Russian troops from Ukraine, and a lot of countries voted that they agree with that, that should happen, and China just basically abstained. They didn't vote. So they don't want to show that they are against or pro this situation. And I think the reason for that being the harsh economical sanctions that were imposed and other potential threats, I guess.
Right. Lanyi, shall we just do it in English? Because I don't even look at the Chinese social media that much. So, but you take an interest, right?
Yeah, I'm on Weibo, and I share with him like what people on Weibo said about this thing every day, basically.
So, how would you characterize, the dominant view in China?
I partially understand because I think in the first few days when I had a call with my mom, and he was kind of like pro-Russia, because from her point of view, she just got all the information from the national media and from her friends around her. Yeah.
But what could CCTV say? I mean, Ukraine, they couldn't be saying Ukraine is invading Russia, could they?
All they said is Russia and its self-defense. It's no way to go but start the war, because Ukraine is going to join NATO, which will put a threat to China.
China?
Yes, that's the saying.
So Russia is even doing China a favor?
Yeah.
Wow.
The narrative about NATO is also quite interesting, because Ukraine as a country applied to NATO multiple times, and we were rejected every time. So the idea of aggressive expansion just doesn't exist. Of course, after 2014, more people were willing for Ukraine to join NATO, obviously, but that happens only because our territory were annexed in the first place. Who knows what would happen if Russia wouldn't have annexed Crimea and those two cities on the east.
I even heard Putin once wanted to join NATO. And he was rejected. And anyway, why did you think the West didn't react that strongly in 2014? And why is this time different? Russia expected probably similar reaction.
Yeah, I think in 2014, Ukraine as a country was in a very weak spot. Our army was practically non-existent. We didn't have any equipment, we didn't have any experience even. Our economy was falling down. We didn't have any good international and strong international relationship. So it was truly the weakest part in the history. But during the 8 years, we managed to invest more in the army. We trained our troops. We built a better relationship with the Western countries and practically made the whole countries much stronger, our country much stronger. So originally Putin stated in his speech that they would take over Ukraine in 3 days. And this statement was based on the experience with Crimea, because basically there was almost no fighting back. Ukrainian army was not able to fight back Russian army at the time. But today we can fight back, and we are fighting back quite effectively as well. And thanks to international connections we developed over those 8 years, we finally were able to push Western countries forward to actually go on this step and impose stronger sanctions. I think another factor that helped in that was just people around the world. Ukrainians who gathered on across the whole world in different cities just to pressure their own democratic government to actually give a support to Ukraine. For example, Berlin, it was around 100,000 people they went all on the streets to support Ukraine, and Germany changed their international policy in a long time. They would never send weapons to a country with active conflict, but now it's just different context. So they actually went on this step on cutting down economical relationship with Russia, not buying their gas or reducing the amount, and sending weapon to Ukraine instead of just sending us helmets or something that's not going to help, really.
It sounds like you are quite positive on the West reaction. So what's your view on no-fly zone and its consequence that's going to bring NATO into war with Russia?
Yes.
Because you live in London, right? So this also affects people, your friends here, me possibly. Yeah. And yes.
Yeah, I would say that this war showed that European Union can be united, but NATO might come with a weaker response. So they are really afraid of showing that they want to participate in the conflict openly. And I saw numerous speeches from Putin who basically threaten Western countries. As soon as they get involved into the conflict, there will be huge consequences. And I think part of the threatening policy, what Russia is doing, was setting their nuclear forces on high alert, for example. And I don't know if NATO is ready to actively involve, but there are some other creative ways they can participate without participating directly. So, for example, one of the things that will help Ukrainians is just planes. We don't have much planes who can protect the sky. So if NATO or some European countries send us those planes, it's not going to be direct involvement, but at the same time, Ukrainian army will be able to protect the cities that are currently under constant rocket strikes and airstrikes.
Have you thought about going to Ukraine to fight? Do you have friends who have enlisted?
Yes, actually, yeah, I have a few friends who joined either volunteering or they joined we call it a territory defense. So yes. Basically just local defense forces. And actually it's kind of funny situation because you can't really get to those forces very easily because the queue is so big. Mm-hmm. So there are so many people willing to join that you can't really join easily if you try right now. I was certainly thinking about going back, and the feeling I have is that I'm not helping enough. Yeah. Because people are living in shelters, they are bearing babies in underground station because it's not safe to go to the hospital and bear a baby. The hospitals are destroyed, the kindergarten are destroyed, there's constant airstrikes. It's just terrifying state to be in. So I feel like me being here in London in a safe place I'm almost ashamed of that because I can't really support them directly. Obviously, I'm trying to help other ways like donating to army, donating to all the charity funds and other kind of place. However, I can spend my money, which is one way to help, and spreading the information on social media. But I still feel it's not enough. It's just not enough support.
Should we talk about China? I don't know how and what is the... Are you upset about...
Yes.
You are?
That...
Yeah. So so in the last, 9 days, what's your emotional journey?
So I remember the first few days, I'm the same as Ahmed. I wake up and see all those messages. I'm shocked, especially in the first few days, you remember probably, the media say it completely in a different way. And basically some of my friends ask me, how's Ahmed's family? And at the same time, they know they have a friend is in Kiev, from Kiev, and his family is in Kiev. But at the same time, I think they are standing with what China is supporting. So it's just completely different for me, and I'm quite shocked at that time. And and then this thing just evolved in unexpected way, I think. And people start analyzing this situation from international relationship and saying it's not Russian has no way to go but has to do that. The U.S. is the bad one. Just to feel. Because I see on social media, on Weibo every day, and I see all the trading headline articles, what they prefer, that's very obvious, especially you have a comparison with what I saw, what Ahmed told me from Ukrainian media. I just feel it's I can't do...
Yeah, please continue. I'm just going to hit the delivery order button, and then when the food comes we can stop.
Okay. I just feel it's I don't have too much things to do, and I keep thinking why this happened. So I talked to friends from different countries, and I was talking to a friend from originally from US and asked her, and she almost cried because of that. But I don't think my friend had a similar emotion, even if we're close enough. And she just said maybe everybody in Europe or in US have some friends from Kiev, but in China they feel Ukraine so far away. Mm-hmm. And I had this feeling when I first met Ahmed, and I never know anybody from Ukraine, and I search on Chinese media and social media. There's not a lot of information about Ukraine, so I basically learned from what I saw from the people Ahmed introduced me from, because I've been to Ukraine twice, to Lviv and Kiev, just my observation. I feel most, on TikTok, most of people are supporting Russia, and you don't know what to do, because the information they can't get access to the information that we have.
I have the feeling that Russians are probably not that against it as we hope.
I would say so. The last the sociology reports I saw is that roughly 58% or 60% of population supports the war, and it's more among the older generation. So older generation, it's 70% support, and younger generation is 40% support. That's the numbers I remember from the report. So and I think that's part of the hope with those economical sanctions and all the pressure from international communities, that people inside the country can change something about the situation, because Putin doesn't really listen to anybody. It doesn't really seem to affect him. Sanctions, after imposing those economical sanctions, despite their local currency ruble going down, basically going towards infinite inflation, he even doubled down on launching the rockets and destroying the infrastructure we have in Ukraine. And
I find it quite hard to ask questions, because to me it's such a black and white issue. I feel weird having to explain to people why it is wrong to kill, and so I'm not sure I can bridge the gap between us and our what most people in Chinese media think. And do you think this is going to change your life? If so, how?
I don't think I will ever forget this experience, to be honest. Despite me not being there directly, it still indirectly affects me anyway. because I'm just constantly looking at those images of my home being destroyed. The place I grew up in is just no longer exists, some of those places. And you never know when you wake up next time, and will there be a home to come back to? You just don't know. It will definitely stay in my memory forever. And I don't know how it will affect me long term. I can't really predict the future, but I think one of the effects I'm seeing right now is that Ukraine as a country become more united than ever. Like right now, everyone, however they can participate to the resistance, they do. They just help in any possible way. And it seems like everyone is united against that. Everyone is donating all the money they have. They helping with the food supply, transportation. They just helping however they can, just to protect their land, basically, because we have a purpose in this.
Yeah. And do you know any hackers that's hacking Russia?
Yeah, sure. A lot of Ukrainian hackers, but also from international community, they just basically attacked the Russian governmental websites. Not only attacked and keep doing that still. I saw a report that somebody hacked the electricity charger in Russia. And basically there is a little screen there. And it says Slava Ukraini, Героям Slava. And it translates to glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. It's our greetings, greeting of resistance. And they just hacked this random electricity charger with this saying on a display. So
I have this feeling, again, on social media we have quite a lot of images, short videos that's quite inspirational and, really cheer you up, that make me think, oh, you know what, this is going well for Ukraine. But Russia has a nuclear weapon. None of this is going to affect that fact. And Putin, if he wants to, he can win the war. It just, the power is disproportional. If he's willing to just carpet bomb Kiev, what can you do?
I think one important thing is that nations are built on stories, on legends, on this kind of perception.
Yeah.
And right now we have so many stories Ukraine went through that we can build a very strong nations out of it if we can survive. Another thing is that I think despite the best effort that Putin can put in, he can basically destroy the country, he can destroy the land, he can destroy the infrastructure, he can never kill all the Ukrainians in the world. Mm-hmm. Ukraine will still basically be preserved in hearts of everyone. Yeah, of course you can't really do much with nuclear weapon, but I think if Putin actually go for it, we have a much bigger problem, because there will be open nuclear disaster, and in this case I'm sure other countries would need to participate, and who knows how it will end up for all of us. It might not make sense in this case.
I think it might. I mean, my family, not my parents, but my aunt is telling me that I should go to China or to Canada. She thinks
UK is even dangerous.
The whole of Europe is in danger. I don't know.
I think everyone is in danger. When there is a nuclear war, I don't think there is a place to hide. You can go to Australia, you still will be affected. The Russian missiles can travel around the world. There is no place you can hide from nuclear missiles.
Would you say if your president accepted a partition of Ukraine, do you think Ukrainian people will go along with it?
I don't think our president will accept it. And I don't think...
Is that a rational choice?
I think it might not be rational, but I think it's necessary.
I think it's better to have cool heads. What's the objective now it's a romantic thing to die for your country, which it is, but at the same time, Germany was partitioned for, God knows how long, and that probably avoided a lot of trouble. for all of Europe, and in time, things might change.
To be honest, I feel since the recent days, it's very hard for me to think about the future now. I'm thinking in one day time scale. I no longer plan for too far in the future because every day you don't know how things will go.
Yeah.
So I even try to avoid thinking about too far. For example, I'm not thinking, well, if we win a war, how we gonna restore the infrastructure? We need some investment. I mean, in the country, how we gonna attract investment after such a disastrous events? How we gonna show that there is no risk for investments and stuff like that? I'm trying to avoid those thoughts even because right now it almost feels like we just need to stop this attack because just regular people are dying. And but at the same time, you don't want to give up your home. If intruder get into your home and they suddenly start living in your bedroom and they said, well, now it's my bedroom, I don't think anybody will give this up very easily. And just like that, there is not much cases where you can just give up. Okay, I agree, it's your bedroom, stay there.
That's actually quite a Western, I would say, thing. I think in China people say have the bedroom. What do you want the Chinese government to do? For sure, they will be censoring this program, so you might as well tell them.
So from my perspective, a stronger, even economical pressure from China might bring Putin to some senses, because then there is nowhere to hide. Like cutting off from Western banking system is one thing, but not being able to access Chinese banking system is, you can't really go anywhere. So, but in this case, China as a country need to take a side, and I think it's quite unlikely. Yeah.
And what do you want to say to the Chinese people?
I think it's very easy to look at the war and then feel that it's so far away, distant from you. You don't really have any personal connection, so it's fine. It's not that important, it's not that critical, it's far from me. But if you understand that there are regular people there with regular lives, they have their family, they have their children, they have their jobs, and they are right now trying to protect their life, not to die basically. They're just trying to survive. When you look at this conflict from the human perspective, when you understand that there are people there, I believe that it will change your perspective on the conflict as a whole. Because it's not about general country with another general country. It's about people who are currently losing their lives.
And what do you say to those people who say the Western sanction is making innocent Russians miserable? Their life saving might be gone. They might be out of a job.
From my perspective, the problem of the whole regime that Putin established has been going on for years. And there has been no major resistance, and even the resistance that's been in the country was effectively destroyed. So Russian people are partially responsible for the madman to gain so much power that he can't be influenced by anyone. And my hope is that even though regular Russian people might not be directly responsible, they are part of this story as well. Because there is no other forces who can push Putin out or somehow change the policy except for Russian people themselves. So I think even though it's harsh, I think it's necessary just to show them that this war doesn't really do well for yourself personally as a Russian citizen. You see the economy is falling, crumbling apart. You see that you can no longer use the MasterCard or Visa or pay for Spotify and stuff like that. And it should suggest you that there is a reason for it. And the reason for it, because your country invaded another sovereign country with no provocation from Ukraine side. So it was unprovoked conflict, basically.
Do you think Ukraine has the military capability of send missiles to Russia?
No. We don't. That's the weakest part in our army, basically, is the air force. We are giving a very strong resistance on land, but we can't protect very well from incoming rockets and airstrikes and bombs and stuff.
But if you had planes from the West, do you support sending airplanes to bomb Russian cities?
No, of course not. Nobody in Ukraine wants that. That doesn't make any sense. We don't need Russia. We just don't want to interact with
But in
them.
this war, in this fight,
Why would we attack cities in another country? We don't need that. What we need is to take back what's ours, to take back our own land. We don't want to gain more land from Russia.
is your husband too civilized to win?
Yeah, he's quite polite.
But I think that puts you at a disadvantage, no? When you are in a war, if you're not willing to hurt the other side, you just want to say, "Get out, please."
I don't think it puts us at a disadvantage, to be honest. I honestly believe that we have no motivation and no interest of attacking Russia directly. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So are you going to see your parents?
Yes.
Yes, sure.
Soon?
Yeah, it's either this upcoming week or maybe on weekend. Yeah, we still constantly in touch. Like we have calls every day and writing each other frequently.
So I want to they lived in central Kiev, or they have a house or apartment?
They have apartment. So Kiev is kind of separated by the Dnipro River, and we have a left bank, we have right bank. So they lived on the left bank, and the city center is on the right bank. So they were slightly further from the city center.
And do you still have a room in that apartment?
Yeah, it's used as a warehouse now.
Okay. And do you still have any personal belongings?
Yes. Yeah, I have some.
Did they take any of your belongings?
No, not really. To be honest, when they were evacuating, it's not very good to take more stuff because people were prioritized. So the priority was to evacuate more people, not stuff from the city.
But I was having this fantasy of, if I were Ukrainian, I were leaving, would I booby trap my flat and put landmines in my flat and then just to say fuck you to the people who came? And I decided no.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
But the problem is that we already, like my parents and I already accepted the fact that apartment can be destroyed anytime.
Yeah.
Because in Kharkiv, for example, city, I think it's around 400 kilometers from Kiev towards the eastern border.
Yeah.
Russians basically destroyed just the regular houses, apartments. There was no military infrastructure there. There was no strategic forces hiding somewhere in those apartments. It was just regular apartments. And now it's just ashes, basically. They just...
And then come back to, if there's an agreement. So earlier we talked about partition. What about Russian armies leave, but Putin remains unpunished for the war crimes, but you have your country back? I know this is academic debate. It probably doesn't make sense, but is it worth it?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
You want to see Putin on trial?
I just feel it's not fair. Like, it's just not fair because I read the report like 2 days or 3 days ago. 2,000 Ukrainians, civilians, not military forces, 2,000 Ukrainians died already in this conflict. Right now it's probably up to 4,000. And it's just not fair. Those people did nothing wrong to Russia, did nothing wrong to their forces. It just feels unfair.
Yeah. I want to say realistically, no NATO for Ukraine for a while.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say it's unlikely.
European Union?
So I think realistically it's also unlikely to happen very soon.
Yeah.
But at least because we have international momentum right now, we can go to this road of applying. Like, for example, a few days ago, our president signed the application form to become a candidate to join the European Union. And this candidacy was reviewed by European Parliament and they accepted the candidacy. But the country can stay as a candidate for a really long time. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years, you never know. But at least it's a step in that direction. It's just pretty much as a symbol or indication that we want to go to that road eventually.
So, do you believe in progress?
In general, yes. I hope right now I'm thinking from the perspective of all the ruins Ukraine endured at the moment, that before we start talking about progress, we first need to rebuild what we had before that.
Yeah.
We lost many regular airports, a lot of roads destroyed, bridges, infrastructure is completely vanished. So without restoring what we had before, we can't really move forward. So that's kind of the first step. And the next step is growing from there.
But we are already moving backwards, right? Because things have been destroyed. And
yeah, sure. It's inevitable because of the conflict.
Yeah. I just feel that we're entering into a dark age. I know you feel sad already, but yeah, I don't know. I feel not. I think maybe European Union and America, basically will be like a Cold War, and then it will be really unlucky for the people who's on the dark side. Are you religious?
No, not really.
But so do you believe there's evil and good?
Well, I wouldn't characterize that like that, to be honest.
So you don't think Putin is evil?
No, I think he is evil.
So you do believe he's evil?
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, yes, we can say it like that.
Yeah. And do you think the people who you know, at least the Russian population who bear partial responsibility for this evil? Well, yeah, I don't know. It's not fair for you to pass judgment on them. But yeah, Putin is evil. Agreed. Okay, it's really difficult. Yeah, maybe we should stop here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.